Hey everybody, welcome back to CALLOUS Draft League Week 4 Team Draft Action. This is the only team combo that I've not yet covered this week. It's going to be between the pink team on the left-hand side and the orange team on the right-hand side. These are two of the teams that are definitely below green, but definitely above red. They are basically four middling teams that are fighting for a playoff spot, and this match definitely has big ramifications going forward since it is only a 6-week regular season, and this is, in fact, week 4. So, this pairing didn't really give me a lot of choice as far as which team draft to cover, because in a couple of their team drafts, they've got some trolly stuff going on where I guess people are playing against their friends or whatever, and they agreed to draft NU against each other. Not the whole draft. We've got 4 people drafting normally, and then 2 people directly drafting NU stuff against each other. I mean, there isn't a tournament rule against that. Maybe there should be. Technically, if players want to make agreements and do dumb things like that, they are allowed to. But I really have zero interest in taking an hour of my time to comment on it or to subsequently narrate those matches. So, not going to be doing that. Therefore, we are going to watch this draft, which, even though it doesn't have the biggest names, it is a draft where everyone was drafting OU. So, there's that. And let's get into it. Like I said, it is the pink team over here on the left kicking off, and then the orange team on the right receiving. Cyberas, Bohrier, Celdanami, sure, for pink. And then TRowe, and then we've seen these two guys before, Blizihguh, and Volta on the orange team. So, kicking it off with the most boring standard, I feel like I've done this every video this round thing ever. T-Tar meta. Let's not waste time. I've done this every time. I'm still... these picks will never offend me. I'm not convinced these are the picks, period. It's figured out. But I guess I'm in the minority. This seems to be what everybody thinks is the thing to do in this format. So maybe in the future that'll change, but that's where we are right now. Moving on. Snorlax. You know I'll bitch about that in just a moment. Skarm and Celebi is the response. Lax I don't think is that good in this format. I think it's way, way, way worse than this first round pick. I think it's like a 3rd or a 4th round pick, and I think it goes badly and gets countered basically every damn time. But maybe this will be the one time that it doesn't, but this is not a pick that I agree with or that I would make. Skarm into Tar is fine. I think I probably would have swapped these and done them the other way around. I think I like Celebi into Tar and maybe Skarm into Meta, but both T-Tar or Meta can just go mixed. So, like, Skarm is obviously going to be good against the physical part, but it's not going to be perfect one way or another. But as a nitpick, I probably, if I were picking these two Mons, which that's a different question, but if I were picking these two Mons, I would probably have simply swapped the positions. But let's carry on. So Cyberas with the double pick here, picking into an opponent that he knows has Lax. I mean, to be fair, all of Tar, Meta, Skarm, and Celebi are good into Lax, so those are off the table, including 2 things that his teammates helped him out with. But I still think there's a million viable Lax counters here. He's going to go with Gengar and also Blissey, and the Bliss is unusual. It typically matches up pretty poorly into the Lax. So the Gar I'm down with, but I'm not as sure about the Blissey there. He could just be ignoring the Lax, planning on finding other ways to counter it later, and just building a generically solid team. Obviously, Gar and Blissey go on plenty of teams together and have plenty of synergy, but I don't know that Blissey would be my personal pick here with the Lax on the other side. And the Gar I'm fine with, though obviously Lax can just load up Shadow Ball, so good picks, but I don't know if they're great picks into what your opponent already has. So we'll see. Swinging it back, it's going to be the following triple pick. It will be Raikou, Zapdos, and Salamence, respectively. So the Raikou is into the Metagross, which is fine. His neutral is a wash. It neither counters and smashes Metagross nor gets absolutely destroyed by it. EQ is obviously a thing, but Metagross doesn't want to switch into Raikou either. Kind of a wash, doesn't really interact with the Metagross one way or another. So that pick doesn't offend me, but like I probably would have taken something specifically with what the opponent already took in mind. But Volta may see it differently and may simply just be building what he views as a good cohesive team, not paying too much attention to his opponent. Maybe some really offensive, special, spammy kind of thing here, but too early to see where it will develop. This is weird to me. Zapdos into Tar. That feels kind of backwards. Again, I don't mind the Zapdos pick here. I think the positions are a little weird. I think that the Mence would have been better in the Tar. I think the Zapdos would have been better into the Metagross. I think you could take Swampert or some kind of bulky water into the Tar. You could take Hariyama into the Tar. Zapdos into Tar are a little bit weird to me. Zapdos obviously a good Mon. I just don't know that I, again, love it based on what the opponent has taken. So I don't know that I really love the way anybody's drafting so far. It seems that there's a lot of just take what I want to take, just take what makes sense on my team. But there's a whole nother layer to the format other than that. You have to really consider what your opponent has and try to counter them. And I don't feel that currently too much of that is going on. And I mean, hey, that's different than some of the other drafts that we've had that have been non-stop counter draft central. So hey, we bring all flavors to you here on the CALLOUS Narrates YouTube channel. Maybe this will be more interesting. You guys let me know. Salamence here is going to be the pick. Again, that feels very strange into a Gengar and a Blissey that are not going to be one-hit KO'able by you and are both going to have ice attacks. That pick doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's the same shit. On paper, does it make sense with Snorlax? Yeah, of course those two have good offensive synergy. Of course those two go on teams together. But is it good into what's on the other side? I would say pretty flatly, no. But that is the theme of the draft so far. I don't care what my opponent has. I don't care about the matchup. I'm just going to draft good stuff that I like. Fair enough. So Celdanami has the next pick. Going to go Regice, and then it's going to be a Jolteon pick for Bohrier. Interesting that he does not value Swampert here. It's unusual to see Swampert make it out of the first round, but I do see why he would take Jolteon here. The first thing even like resembling a counter pick in the early goings of this draft. But starting with the Regice, I mean, there's two special mons on the other side. Premier special walls, such as Celebi, Lax, and Blissey, are all gone. You feel like you need a special wall in order to combat this seemingly special-based offense. So Regice does, in fact, make sense and seems like a good pick. Jolteon is interesting here. This is probably earlier than most people would generally take Jolteon, but it is good into both the Skarm and the Zapdos. You obviously want to watch for Toxic from Skarm and T-Wave from Zapdos, but generally speaking, 1v1, Jolteon has play against those, and if you take the team in a very offensive direction, and again, it's too early to know if he will or if he won't, but it does have good offensive synergy with Tar. I would note, of course, that there is a double EQ weakness here, but that should be easy enough to deal with down the line. That should be easy enough to address down the line. So it's now going to switch over to Blizz, and then we're going to make our way to the left. And it's going to be... Dugtrio and Hariyama, you say? I mean... I don't love or hate the Doug here. It's too early, and there's only one target, the T-Tar. Remember that Jolteon is going to outspeed Dugtrio and then simply baton pass away from it. So the only thing that you're trapping is the T-Tar, and the fact that you've now shown Dugtrio this early I wouldn't be surprised if Bohrier now doesn't draft a single additional Dugtrio weak or Dugtrio trappable Pokemon for the rest of the draft. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of value. I think this is ultimately going to end up being a wasted pick. Having an insurance policy against T-Tar and having the ability to baton pass to it with the classic Zap Dug combo, those are both desirable things, but ultimately it's probably going to be only for the T-Tar, and that doesn't feel like enough. That doesn't feel worth it to me. And if it does end up being just the T-Tar that he can realistically trap and get value, that prompts the question of, do you even bring the Dugtrio, and was it a wasted pick? We're going to have to see what gets grabbed in order to answer that question, but as a preliminary, I'm going to say that I think that Dugtrio pick is probably not good and will ultimately probably not end up having the impact that he wants it to have, because I think it's just too early, and I think Bohrier will simply draft around it on a going forward basis. So the Hariyama here, it's fine. I could take or leave. I mean, it's good against Blissey, obviously. It's whatever against Dugtrio or Gengar. I'm still stuck on Dugtrio. I don't know that it does anything particularly special or like overly synergizes with what he's already got. I don't know that it's like terrible in the matchup either, or like awful synergy with what he has. It doesn't stand out to me as doing anything special or anything in particular alongside the Lax and the Mence. In the same vein as the Lax, it's kind of just another slow mon, another fat mon. We'll see. I mean, it's the same as a lot of the picks so far this draft. It isn't like objectively bad. It's a good Pokemon. It's a poke that I'm happy to have. I'm just not clear why it's being picked in this specific situation or in this specific matchup. That's the part that I would need some clarity on. So moving over to pink for the triple pick, they are going to do this. Heracross, Fori, and Milotic. The Heracross is fine. Yeah, I mean, there's a Selby on the other side, general good mon. Too early to know if Volta's going to have a bazillion counters for it or whatever, but you're not going to go too far wrong with Heracross. It's just a good poke. As far as Heracross and Raikou, neutral-ish. Heracross can bring Earthquake if he's truly worried about the Raikou on the other side. But yeah, I mean, you got like a blue offense kind of thing going on for Celdanami. Might have a couple booms with a Heracross on the back. Again, it doesn't. I'm just gonna be a broken record, I think, in this draft. It doesn't stand out as, oh, that makes so much sense given what his opponent took. I get why he did that. That hoses X. That hoses Y. It isn't really one of those picks. It's just like a generically good mon that goes with his team. Is it like the thing to have in the matchup? No. Like, for example, for Celdanami, couldn't he just take Aerodactyl here? Isn't that a better pick? Doesn't that really, really put pressure on the Celebi and the Raikou? Like, to me, Aerodactyl is just a far superior option in this spot, but I'm not offended by the Hera. It's just another one of those picks. It's fine. It's somewhere in the, like, top 10 best options. It's not a garbage pick. I just don't know that it's the optimal pick. For me, Aerodactyl is the thing to take in that situation. In the middle, Fortress here. Sure. Fori, as I mention every time, I think is just flat out worse in this than it is in the other format, because it's all face up and you know it's coming and it's easy enough to load up on HP Fires and hate on it. But that being said, given what's on the other side, it's not exactly easy right now for Blizz to have HP Fire. Both Dugtrio and Skarm are not going to have HP Fire and would be terrible at it if they did have it. So perhaps this is one of the matchups where you can get away with Fori and not worry about a million HP Fires, at least for the time being. And yeah, it has good synergy with both Tar and Jolteon, so while I don't think Fori is that great in this format, just as an in general, I can get down with that in the matchup, and obviously you need a Rapid Spinner, given the Skarmory on the other side. I mean, Starmie comes to mind immediately, but I guess with Zapdog on the other side, I could see why you wouldn't want to go Starmie here. So, okay. I mean, I don't love passing the Starmie. I mean, Volta here could wheel Aerodactyl Starmie, which is absolutely ridiculous for a third and a fourth pick. But I can see why he would take Fori. And then the Milotic pick is pretty straightforward. There's Immense on the other side. There you go. It's a Milo, and it just fits organically with this Stolly team that he's building, though it is kind of weird. I mean, you would think that he's the one who wants the Fori or whatever. This team really, really, for Cyberas, wants Spikes at some point. Not clear exactly who he plans to add going forward. I mean, there's Cloyster Glalie, I guess, but this team very much looks to me like it wants Spikes. Otherwise, it is very, very passive, in my opinion. So the wheel pick for Volta. He's going to take the Aerodactyl that I feel very strongly his opponent should have taken. And then he's also going to grab a Flygon. I mean, the Aerodactyl's a no-brainer. You're certainly not passing that back. Flygon, huh? Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the Flygon pick. He probably just thinks he needs a rock resist, but I don't know. Is it good against any of this stuff? It doesn't really switch into Meteor Mash. Certainly doesn't switch into Ice Beam. Doesn't really switch into Mega Horn. What does the Flygon do in this matchup? I mean, again, kind of like with the Fori, it's not the easiest thing for this stuff to have ice attacks. Metagross can have Ice Punch, but, like, it won't. Regice obviously will have Ice Beam, and then, like, Heracross, is that going to randomly have HP Ice for the Flygon? I'm going to go with no, so, like, maybe you can get away with it, but, like, even if the 4X weakness doesn't get, like, super duper targeted in this, and it very well still may since there's all these picks to go, even if it doesn't, it just doesn't make a lot of sense with just these pokes being normal. Like I said, it doesn't switch into Mash or Ice Beam or Mega Horn, so, like, I don't think the Flygon really does a lot in this matchup. Yeah, like I said, I think he just felt like he needed a rock resist, so there you go. Behold, rock resist. But meh on that pick. Aerodactyl this late is really, really good. It's not incredible in the matchup, nor terrible, but like his opponent definitely should have taken that, and you certainly don't pass it back. So Aerodactyl gets grabbed. Swing it back to the pink team on the left-hand side. They have a triple pick, and they will do this. Medicham, Swampert, and Blizihguh. Medicham's good. I don't know that it has the best synergy with what's already taken here. This team, I thought was a stall team, but Medicham, I don't know. I don't really know where it fits. Kind of lacks cohesion with the rest of the squad, but it is just a generically good Mon. In this particular matchup, it's fine. It's neutral. It's good against Lax. It's bad against Mence. It's neutral-ish against Yama. So it's neither amazing nor terrible in the matchup. To me, it's more that it feels like a weird fit. And this team really, 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 really wants to add Spikes at some point. But, yeah, I mean, it was overly passive in my opinion. I mean, still is, but Medicham is a step in the right direction, and we'll see how he proceeds. Swampert. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it does anything special in this matchup. In fact, it seems meh in the matchup so far, but it certainly has synergy with the rest of what he's building. So as far as just building a cohesive team that makes sense, Swampert is a great bedrock piece here. Obviously goes with the T-Tar, has good synergy with Fori. We've seen other people pick Fori and Swampert as their 1 and 2. Never mind their 3 and 4, so really good value to get it this late. No objections. Blizihguh. I guess. I mean, it doesn't seem that good to me. Even the Celebi that it theoretically beats can just outspeed it and then hit it with Psychic, and then You don't beat the Raikou one-on-one, and you're outsped. You don't beat the Aerodactyl one-on-one, and you're outsped. You don't beat the Flygon one-on-one, and wait for it, and you're outsped. This pick doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and there's still some really high-quality Mons available that I'm kind of surprised haven't been taken yet. I don't personally think I like or overly agree with the Blizihguh pick. So, TRowe, Starmie, outrageous, crime against humanity that thing is still available this late. And then Sceptile. The Starmie is being picked into an opponent that does not have spikes, which is weird, but how do you not take it here? It's just such a good damn Pokemon, whether the opponent ends up having spikes or not. It's got a lot of play into this. It can sit on the Milotic forever. It can be good against the Gaur. You could outspeed it in a Psychic, or you can opt for a bulky T-Wave set, whatever. You could generally sit on the Bliss forever, Calm Mind and Toxic pending, but between the Lax and the Starmie, the Bliss is going to be very well covered. Yama as well. And then you've got some play against the Metacham. Obviously, you have to watch out for Shadow Ball, but again, just checking it in combo, so like the Mence and the Starmie combined, is a good way to deal with the Cham, and who knows what gets added after the fact. But honestly, regardless of how good or not good it theoretically is in the matchup, how do you pass up Starmie when it is somehow available this damn late? I think the answer is you don't, and TRowe agrees. So really, really blessed pickup there. Not something that's going to be available at the end of the fourth fucking round very often. Gotta grab Starmie in that spot. Blizz is going to opt for Sceptile. Sure, makes sense of the matchup. Obviously a big offensive threat to the T-Tar and the Swampert. Resist the electric from Jolteon. Can have HP Fire against Fori. Sceptile could hit all four of these things meaningfully and be a good threat. And it has good synergy with Spikes. It has good synergy with Dugtrio. I'm down. Yeah, I like the Sceptile pick. Earlier than Sceptile is usually picked, but makes plenty of sense in this situation. No objections to that particular pick. So swing it back over to Bohrier. He's going to go with Dragonite. And then we're also going to see Vaporeon. Dragonite, huh? Well, that's a grass resistance that he certainly needs. I think Dragonite actually would have been an interesting pick for his opponent. Mixed breakers tend to be very good against this kind of core. But yeah, Dragonite is just a good Mon. There's not really too much to it beyond that. It happens to have a fighting resist that maybe T-Tar appreciates. His opponent doesn't currently have fighters, but maybe he will down the road. It's also a grass resist, which again, the team certainly appreciates. Gives him the option of Bell, gives him a proactive win condition. Just as far as generically good team, even if it isn't specifically into what the opponent has, just building a cohesive team that makes sense. That's what Bohrier's been doing throughout the draft, and Dragonite I don't think disrupts that. So totally good with the Dragonite pick. The Vaporeon. Sure, I mean, I guess against Aerodactyl Flygon you are incentivized to take a bulky water. It's a little bit awkward when Celebi and Raikou are, of course, going to have the advantage against just about any bulky water, but that doesn't mean that you don't need one, so that'll give you a little bit of play against the Arrow and the Flygon that you need, and then if you happen to baton pass a substitute to basically any of these, either the fighters or the Metagross, that would be very much appreciated. They become enormous threats when they are hiding behind a substitute, so makes plenty of sense to me. I think the Vaporeon is a sensible pick given his current position. So, the triple pick now for the orange team on the right-hand side. They're going to do this. Venusaur, Slowbro, and Charizard. Okay, we'll do them in order as we do. So, starting with the Venusaur. That seems like a good Mon against Cyberas. It's going to resist fighting, first of all. And unlike the other fighting resist, Starmie, and also Men's resist fighting, but unlike Starmie, the Venusaur is not pounded by Shadow Ball, and then Leech Seed is going to be very obnoxious for both Blissey and Milotic. And given the, like I said, just passive nature, I think, of Cyberas' team, I think that Mons like Venusaur have a lot of opportunities to shine and can fling Leech Seeds and fling Sleep Powders and are generally going to be pretty annoying to play against. So no objection to that pick. Slowbro is interesting. I think that it just follows the mixed breaker theme, and he's certainly going to want more than just a Dugtrio to try to deal with a Tyranitar. So starting to gain some layers against it between the Scar and the Dug, and now a bulky Water. I think that'll certainly help the cause. And like I said, mixed breakers in general, like Slowbro, weirdly, it actually learns Flamethrower, for example, so that could target the Fori. Slowbro is a sensible pick to me as well. Charizard for Volta. Boy, is this team aggro as hell. The Zard, sure. I mean, triple fire weakness in Metagross, Regice, Heracross, right? So fire attackers are obviously going to have merit here. It also resists fighting for Blizihguh purposes. So Zard actually seems, even though it like isn't at all defensive, and Volta has just like completely forsaken defensive pieces for the most part, unless you want to count the Flygon. I think that generally speaking, the Zard makes a lot of sense in the matchup, despite the fact that his opponent just took Vaporeon. So I don't really have any gripe with that pick either. These three picks make some amount of sense to me. Here comes the swing back for Cyberas with the double pick. Wheezing into Lax makes sense, and then he's going to grab Moltres as well. Yeah, I mean, the Wheezing into Lax is very hard to argue with. It's also Wheezing into Hariyama, so I mean, again, it's very difficult to argue with that. The one weird thing, like I said, is that this team is still pretty passive, I think, but something to note is that this is now, he now has triple Will-O-Wisp. Gengar, Weezing, Moltres can all learn it, so physical attackers are going to have a rough day at the office, and then for the ones who randomly do have guts or whatever, like Hariyama might, I mean, that'll certainly just make him vulnerable to special attacks. If he's got guts, he's just going to take a lot from Flamethrower, for example, but even then, there's a Wheezing on the other side, and then if you neutralize all the special attackers by just, or physical attackers rather, by just burning them all, and force your opponent to rely on special attackers, well, there's a Blissey waiting for you. So Cyberas' team, while it is a little bit on the passive side, he's addressed that a little bit with the Medicham and the Moltres, but this team looks very, very obnoxious to play against, without a doubt, and probably tricky to switch into until the sets are known. Not clear how I feel about this overall matchup right now, but certainly walls and walls and walls of Will-O-Wisp and status and all that nonsense coming from Cyberas here. And like I said, the Wheezing into the Lax alone is enough justification, but if it happens to also find the Hariyama on the other side, then it's hard to argue with that as well. So it swings back to orange for the triple pick, and they are going to do this. Machamp, Claydol, and Scooby-Doom. So Machamp, sure. I'm not clear why. It, again, it doesn't offend me. It just, what's the merit in this specific matchup? I mean, any fighter against Regice, right? But other than the Regice, what are you trying to accomplish with the Machamp? It doesn't seem bad. It just seems random. It just seems like randomly picking any given Goodmon. Yeah, I can't see any particular reason. I mean, it gets outsped against the other fighters and doesn't have any dirty tricks up his sleeve to make sure that he wins those matchups, and then it's like okay-ish against meta, but again, it gets outsped, has to watch out for Psychic, isn't going to one-hit KO meta anytime soon. Not really blown away by the Machamp pick. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Generically decent Mon, but doesn't really do a lot in the specific matchup. I could kind of take or leave that, I think. Blizz is going to grab Claydol here. That's another layer of protection against the T-Tower. It also happens to be good against the Jolteon, so that alone would be good enough for me to grab it here. But it's also a spinner against Fori. No, it doesn't beat Fori one-on-one unless he happens to have HP Fire, which he probably won't. But you don't necessarily have to beat the Fori one-on-one. You just have to spin away his spikes when you get a free moment. And certainly Claydol is very capable of that. So yeah, the team has come together, I think, for Blizz. Pretty solid squad here that makes sense against what his opponent has. Looking forward to seeing that one play out. Houndoom here is simply being picked into an opponent with a Gengar. I don't think it does too much more in the matchup. In theory, it loses pretty hard to Bliss, but I guess you can have like a beat-up set, which I generally think is pretty janky, but something to throw out there, I suppose. Houndoom certainly does not beat Milotic. I guess it absorbs Will-O-Wisp, which as we discussed, there are 3 of. I guess you could try to Pursuit Trap or Fire Blast against the Weezing. So it has like more than 0 play into other things, but by far the predominant reason to take Houndoom here is because your opponent has a Gengar. So fair enough, that will certainly change the building process for Cyberas. He has to decide what his level of comfort is bringing that Gengar and how likely it is that TRowe does indeed bring the Houndoom rather than leaving it on the bench. Wrapping up this round will be Steelix and Espeon. So we're taking Steelix into someone whose last 3 picks are Flygon, Charizard, and Machamp. Huh. Okay. I don't like it. I mean, I get the appeal when it's Raikou plus Arrow on the other side. So there's that. But his last 3 picks were Flygon, Charizard, and Machamp. I'm going to say I don't like the Steelix pick. I get why he would take it there, but I think it's a trap, and I think the Steelix is going to be very vulnerable in the matchup. It can always just boom on something, but I don't think that pick is going to be nearly as effective as a counter as Steelix sometimes, other times, can be. Espeon, huh? Not sure if I get that one. He could pass Calm Minds if he wants to give like a Mixed Knight or a Jolteon a little bit of a boost, but doesn't really blow me away. Psychic as an attacking type doesn't blow me away in this matchup either, with all of Skarm, Slowbro, and Claydol resisting it. There's also a Dugtrio on the other side that might trap and kill you. The Espeon pick I don't think makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not clear where he's trying to go with that, but I don't think that he's really the aggro in the matchup, probably. I guess it's kind of back and forth. I don't think that Psychic is really an amazing attacking type in this matchup. Not clear how he envisions that going or what he's trying to get out of the Espeon. I mean, I guess he is looking at an opponent that, unless he goes like Rest Talk, Bulky Zap or something that doesn't really have a special wall, so I guess there's that. But I don't think I love the Espeon pick, personally. Alrighty, final round of this. We go back over to Blizz and we work our way left. They're going to do this. Marowak. And also Dusclops. Interesting. Marowak, huh? I guess. I mean, it does give him the combo option. This is the overwhelming reason to make that pick. It does give him the combo option of simply going Agility Zapdos, passing Agility to Marowak, having Marowak survive one hit as it clicks Swords Dance, and then just going off and winning in that way. So in that specific circumstance, just because it has the I just win potential, I guess I can't hate on it too much, but I think he's going to have a pretty difficult time setting that up. I think Bohrier has 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, he's got 4 Mons that all learn Roar as far as messing up combo things, and then he's got quite a few things that learn ice attacks to threaten the Zapdos, or just Rock Slide in T-Tar's case. I think that there's quite a few things that can hit the Marowak super effectively. Yeah, I mean, again, if it makes Bohrier build differently, if it makes him carry a bunch of roars that he ultimately doesn't end up needing or that ultimately don't get that much value, then I guess there's that. And it is cool to just have an I just win out in any given matchup, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like the easiest thing to pull off in this matchup. I'm down for some Marowak cheese, but it's got to be the right circumstances and the right opponent. A dude that's got 4 roars on the other side, I don't know if that's the right opponent, but maybe. It certainly changes the way that the teams need to be built in this matchup, so there is that. Dusclops is an interesting pick. It usually gets picked as someone who wants to protect their spikes, but TRowe doesn't have any. It is certainly possible with both Glalie and Cloyster still floating out there that he simply adds a spiker with his final pick. But as it stands, if it is not being used to protect spikes, I think the Dusclops doesn't really have a lot of merit in this matchup. It can help against Gar, but I don't really think he needs help against the Gar, especially after picking up the Houndoom. It can sit on the Blissey, but again, I think between the Lax, the Yama, the Starmie, the Venusaur, I don't think he's really all that worried about Blissey. And I don't know what it really does otherwise. I could certainly see it potentially losing to Taunt Weezing, Sub Shadow Ball Medicham, Modest Moltres with Fire Blast, Flamethrower, what have you. So I don't think the Dusclops does a lot in this matchup. I think it's not really a fantastic pick here. The one thing that makes it interesting is if he's planning on simply adding a spiker with the final pick. Also noting that Cyberas right now, and we'll see if he respects the possibility of the late spiker being added, but Cyberas does not have a rapid spinner right now, so it would be very interesting if TRowe just goes last pick spiker here, especially because Cyberas has to double pick before it gets back to TRowe, so that would actually really change the dynamic here. I don't know. Very, very interesting. I wonder if he's just planning on adding a spiker at the end. That would be my thought. Otherwise, the Dusclops doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So going over here to the pink team on the left, this is what they will do. Arcanine, Porygon 2, and a very late Gyarados. Okay, the Arcanine. It seems okay. It doesn't seem amazing nor terrible. It's actually really, really good at countering Charizard, so I don't mind it for that reason. And then it's generally good against the Celebi as well. Against this other stuff, obviously not as good. Not so great against Arrow, not so great against Flygon. It's like okay against Machamp. Intimidate is relevant, but not fantastic. I could take or leave the pick. I think it has some play in the matchup, but I also think it has some problems in the matchup. Could take or leave it. Doesn't offend me. I'm okay with the Arcanine pickup here. I do think it's a generally good mon that should be picked in all of these drafts at some point. Porygon 2 into Dugtrio. Why not? I like that better than the Espeon pick. And as a whole, just circling to way, way earlier in the video, going all the way back, this is kind of what I was afraid of. Remember that at the time that he took Dugtrio, this was a million picks ago, and the only thing that Bohrier had at that time, the only two mons he had were T-Tar and Jolteon. None of this other stuff from 4E down had been picked yet. And my commentary at the time, my fear, and this fear that I think has largely come to life, come true, is that Bohrier would just, the whole rest of his draft, just not pick a single thing that gives a shit about Dugtrio. And that is pretty much where we are. Dugtrio does not impress me against 4E, against Swampert, against Dragonite. It's okay against Espeon, I guess, but who cares? And obviously not against Porygon 2. So you're looking at a team, when you're Blizz, you're looking at a team on the other side that Bohrier's drafted, where Dugtrio has like one good target, the T-Tar, and that is it. I mean, honestly, I don't think I would even bring the Dugtrio if I were building from Blizz's seat. And that makes you wonder, if you're taking it that early, you're taking it third pick, and then you don't bring it, not because you're trying to get cute, but because it's genuinely bad in the matchup, which I very much think is the case, then why did you pick it third? I don't know. I didn't like it then. I don't like it now. This is what I was afraid would happen. I think the correct time to take Dugtrio, because there have been a whole heck of a lot of Dugtrio picks made throughout this that I very often criticize, but I think the correct time to take Dugtrio is after the opponent has like at least 3 things that you genuinely want to trap and genuinely get value from a Dugtrio. Because it's too late to go back. If they have 3 pieces or whatever, you have enough. Even if they don't take a single additional thing that's Dugtrio weak, you have enough to justify running it. But the problem with taking it earlier is exactly what you see here, where the opponent can just start drafting around it and make it pretty damn bad. And this is a great example of that. I think the Dugtrio is ultimately pretty damn bad in this matchup, and I don't even think I would bring it if I were building from Blizz's seat. All that being said, the next pick is Gyarados. This is an outrageously late Gyarados. And it seems pretty good, actually, in the matchup. I mean, the coverage isn't going to be perfect no matter what, but just the basic Dragon Dance plus Earthquake plus HP Flying covers a whole heck of a lot of this, basically everything but the Aerodactyl. And then even within that, you can just throw on, say, T-Wave as the last move, and then you really, truly do cover everything. There's also the option, I don't like this option, but just for a talking point, you could go with HP Rock rather than HP Flying, which is obviously better against both the Charizard and the Aerodactyl, but it's that much worse against the Celebi and the Machamp. But a set like DD HP Rock Earthquake Double Edge, for example, is also on the table here. I think that or DD EQ HP Flying T-Wave are the 2 most likely possibilities, and I think both would be good in the matchup. It's a crazy late Gyarados. The one weird thing here is he's taking a third electric weakness with the Milo, the Moltres, and the Gyara into an opponent that he knows has Raikou on the other side, but he feels like he's relying very heavily on the Blissey to take care of the Raikou, and Volta hasn't really drafted anything that changes that dynamic. Volta hasn't drafted anything that's threatening to randomly explode on Blissey or give him something to think about. He hasn't drafted something like Jinx that maybe Blissey tries to switch in, oh fuck, it's Mean Look Perish Trap, and Blissey gets removed in that way. I think Cyberas is going to very reliably be able to switch the Blissey into the Raikou and really not have anything to worry about. If the Bliss finds itself staring down the other pokes, just switch out. Just save it for Raikou. So we'll see how that goes, but I think that the triple electric weakness, while it's normally a little bit alarming, especially when there's no electric resistance, I think is not going to get overly punished in this particular instance, because the Bliss, I really do think, will be enough, for the most part, to negate that Raikou. And depending on what he ends up taking, it's interesting to discuss if you just don't even bring the Raikou. It's so good against a lot of this, but how do you break through the Bliss? an interesting matchup for sure. But we go over to Volta now, who's going to have the double pick, and then it swings back to the right, and we wrap this up. So Volta is going to go with Cloister and Lantern. Okay, well, the Cloister makes sense. It's a spiker. Cool. The spinner part doesn't matter because the opponent doesn't have spikes. Not that he couldn't add them, but doesn't have that at the moment. Spikes obviously benefit Volta's team. His team the whole time has been very, very, very aggro, and spikes in general, and in this case, a spiker that is aggressive leaning and that booms, makes perfect sense for the team. So despite the fact that it was this late of a pick, I think he pretty damn clearly should include the Cloister on the team somewhere. Not clear who gets the boot, maybe the Machamp, but Cloister needs to be on the team. Simple as that. And I think it will be. The Lantern I don't want to spend too much time on. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me in the matchup. And I think it is very, very unlikely that it ultimately makes the team. I think that the team for Volta will probably be minus the Lantern and minus the Machamp. That's what makes sense to me as the 6 that I would probably bring. But I guess there's a world where he cuts the Raikou and brings them a champ if he wants to really, really hone in and target that Bliss and make the Bliss crappy. So I think those are fine combinations, but I don't think the Lantern is basically ever going to end up making this team. So we swing back to the right for the triple pick. Lots to discuss here, but let's go ahead and lay out the picks before we do that. So Ampharos, Articuno, and Dodrio, either or. So the thing that we discussed in this matchup, the A matchup between Cyberas and TRowe, has come to pass. He did not respect the possibility of a very late spiker for TRowe, and he did not pick up a rapid spinner. And I think that opens up TRowe here, especially given what's taken and what's available. I think that opens up a Glalie pick here, and I think that he would get a lot of value from said Glalie pick. I think Cyberas there would have been better served taking a rapid spinner. I think what he's doing instead is he is a little bit worried about the electric weakness, which he probably doesn't need to be. I just realized, man, I'm sorry guys. I'm dumb. I for some reason I just spent that whole segment thinking that the Blissey and the Raikou were against each other. It shows how much attention that I'm paying. That's not the matchup. It's Blissey and Cyberas and this whole team against TRowe. It's Volta and his whole team against Celdanami. So I'm not sure how or why I screwed that up, but I mean, this is an hour-long video, and I'm just not redoing it, so sorry for the confusion there. I don't know how I messed that up, but we're not going to redo it. So let's just get back on the same page clarity-wise. So it is Cyberas against TRowe, and then it's Celdanami against Volta. So taking that into account, the electric weakness really doesn't matter because it's not even into the Raikou. There's nothing electric on the other side. T-Bolt Starmie or something. So that makes the Ampharos pick to me even more puzzling because if you're trying to cover up a blatant electric weakness, sure, fine. But that is not the case in this matchup. TRowe does not have a bunch of electric attackers. And then Ampharos doesn't really cover up a flying weakness. Yeah, there's Immense on the other side, but you've got Gengar, Blissey, Milotic. They're going to be strong against the Ments. And then Ampharos doesn't really cover that because you just get Earthquaked. The Ampharos pick doesn't make a lot of sense. I think he definitely should have looked into a rapid spinner here, and I think it is very, very likely that TRowe just grabs Glalie or whatever spiker, Smeargle, that he prefers in this position, and it ends up getting really good value. Bohrier with Articuno. Yeah, I mean, even more precaution against the Marowak pick. You can outspeed it and hit it with Stab Ice Beam. That probably kills it. And then as far as its setup enabler, the Articuno is reasonable against the Zapdos as well. Very often wins that 1v1, and of course has the ability to roar it out. I think the Articuno pick makes plenty of sense. Dodrio. Yeah, I mean, I guess he sees the Celebi and the Machamp on the other side and is just trying to get your Drill Peck on, I guess. And it could be another Pokemon like the Vaporeon that in theory can baton pass substitutes, but then that means it isn't holding Choice Band. It really doesn't hit that hard. I don't think the Dodrio, you tell me. Dodrio or Dodrio? Not sure. It was always Doduo to me, not Doduo. It was Doduo, so I guess logically it would be Dodrio as well. You guys can let me know if it's Dodrio or Dodrio. I can see the argument either way. Regardless, I don't think the Dodrio three-headed chimera monster bird is going to end up getting played in the matchup, so I don't want to spend too much more time on that. As far as TRowe, what a shock he takes Glalie. That feels just like a missed opportunity for his opponent, who could have just taken Donphan or Tentacruel or Blastoise or whoever and not let this happen. But I think the Glalie is basically a 100% lock to make the team, and I think that the spikes are going to be pretty obnoxious. Granted, if he wants to combat that, he can just bring all of Gengar, Weezing, Moltres, Gyarados and have the draft equivalent of a Superman team and just ignore the spikes. So, like, Glalie is not a blowout necessarily, but I definitely think it's a good pick, and I definitely think it makes Cyberas have to build probably in a weird way that he otherwise wasn't going to, because he never did pick up a Rapid Spinner. And then the final pick here is an Umbreon into the middle matchup. And I don't know what that really changes. I'm thinking not too much. I'm thinking that the Umbreon does not really change the dynamic here and probably won't get played. So that is our draft. Why don't we sit down and look at the correct matchups, if I have a brain and can figure out how to do that, and make some predictions. All right, we've got, in the A seat, we've got Cyberas against TRowe. It's interesting. I don't feel that Cyberas went as hard as many people do, and as he probably should have, into countering the lax. I think the lax might actually be good here, and I think that that is mostly due to Cyberas probably not drafting correctly. I think that we've seen other people demonstrate repeatedly how to beat Snorlax and how to make it not good. You end up with these teams of Armaldo, not taken, Sableye, not taken, Leech Seed user, not taken, and then Weezing and Fighter, which were taken. But I don't know that Cyberas necessarily did enough to truly negate the lax, and I think his team is pretty passive, so I think him losing to lax is very, very possible. Cyberas, I think, might have some ideas in his head about, like, again, triple Will-O-Wisp spam, and maybe even the Gar or the Weezing or whatever might have taunt, but I still don't necessarily think it's as easy as that. The Will-O-Wisp plan, remember, can just be rested or refreshed away. Lax does learn both of those. And then, yes, you can taunt to prevent rest or refresh, but this is all assuming everything goes perfectly. You still, as Gengar, have to watch out for Shadow Ball. You still, as Weezing or Moltres, the second you get Body Slam paralyzed, it's a problem. And the second you get Body Slam paralyzed as Weezing, you don't get to go first anymore, so your taunt doesn't do anything, and you can't stop the rest or the refresh anymore. We'll see, but I think Cyberas didn't do enough to ultimately stop this lax. I don't think he drafted super duper well. I think at some point, like I said, Armaldo, Sableye, Leech Seeder, more layers of protection could have and should have been grabbed to deal with the Lax, and I think ultimately the Lax has a chance to just win the day for TRowe. Now, granted, the Salamence, I think, honestly, if I'm TRowe, I would strongly consider not even bringing it. I can't see any set of Salamence that I think is all that good here. There's going to be triple Ice Beam on the other side in Gengar, Blissey, Milotic, Ice Punch rather for Gengar, but same concept. I think the Gyarados might roll up with T-Wave, really bad for Mence. I think Wheezing is bad for Mence. If you go mixed Mence, it gets completely shut off by the Milotic. I think there's a real consideration, I think, from TRowe's seat to just not bring the Lax at all. One thing that I don't love from TRowe's end, however, as much as I do like the Lax, is that I feel other than the Lax, he's really lacking meaningful win conditions. I think that Starmie, if you were to go off Star, is not going to break through the Blissey here. I think that Hariyama is not a win condition. Belly Drum not realistic in this matchup. There is the Spikes plan that we had discussed before, but probably going to be at least 3 Spikes immune pokes on the other side. So, like, as good as they might be, they're not going to be enough to rely on to actually win the match. So I think the Lax is going to be really, really important for TRowe. Hard to predict who ultimately gets it done here. I don't have strong feelings in this match, but I think I'm going to predict TRowe to win. I think if I were piloting it from TRowe's seat, I think I could engineer a situation where I win with Lax pretty often. And ultimately, I think that the Lax was just not addressed hard enough. So that will be my prediction. I'm going to give the A seat match to TRowe. Moving over to the B. I mean, certainly if I had to ladder with one of these pools, I would choose Bohrier's over Blizz's. I think having a more cohesive team, a more proper team, something closer to an OU team, undoubtedly that is Bohrier. But that being said, I think that Blizz has a reasonable matchup here. I don't like the Dugtrio pick. I think that was probably a misstep that ultimately I don't think is good and will not get played in this matchup, but I do think that the Sceptile is good. I think the Slowbro is going to be good. I guess the problem is there might not be enough good pieces for Blizz. I think he did a number of things right, but his team just feels incomplete. I'm trying to visualize. I would cut the Dugtrio for sure. And I guess that's where my problem kind of falls. So it's Scarm, Zap, Sceptile, Slowbro for sure from Blizz's seat. But then you have to play, if we're not playing the Dugtrio, which like I said, I wouldn't, you have to play 2 of the 3 of the Doll, the Marowak, and the Umbreon, all of which honestly kind of underwhelm me in the matchup, but I guess the Doll would be on the team just for the T-Tar and the Jolteon resistance and the ability to spin away for Fori. It doesn't excite me, but like begrudgingly fine, Doll is on the team. And then as far as the last Mon, I don't know. The Umbreon doesn't really do anything. So I guess it's the Marowak. So if I'm visualizing the team as non-Doug, non-Umbreon, and it's just the other 6, how do I like that matchup? It's interesting. The Articuno was a really good late pick from Bohrier. The ice typing is actually pretty good. All of the Zapdos, the Sceptile, the Claydol, the Marowak all hate getting hit with those ice beams, and Scarm doesn't really love it either, so I think the Articuno was very good value late in this for Bohrier, and I think he will almost certainly end up bringing the Articuno. It's hard. I can see a world where Blizz gets there, but I feel like if Bohrier builds it correctly and makes sure he's not cheating on roars and not cheating on ways to disrupt the Zapdos Marowak combo, that Bohrier should win because his team is just better. Blizz certainly should game plan around trying to set up that Sceptile, set up that Slowbro, set up that Marowak, and just letting them go nuts. And I think that Blizz does have some threats in this matchup and does very much have a chance that would not require a miracle in order to get it done. Ultimately, Bohrier doesn't really have a special wall other than the Articuno, and I could see the Sceptile with the Slowbro under the right circumstances really getting there, but reluctantly, I am going to take Bohrier to win this matchup. I think Blizz is just a mon or two shy of having a team that I'm comfortable with and feel good about. I think he's got good pieces, and I don't think his team is terrible, but the last mon or two on his squad, not thrilled about. And that brings us to the last matchup, Celdanami and Volta in the CC tier. Not really sure what happened with Celdanami's draft. I think I'm going to give the advantage to Volta here. I'm not clear where this kind of went at the end, but a lot of this stuff feels kind of redundant to me. Like the Heracross, the Blizihguh, the Dodrio, the Arcanine are like somehow all the same Pokemon to me. Obviously not literally, but like it just feels very redundant. It just feels like they are good against and bad against the same things for the most part. Like, aren't all of those Pokemon, for example, just not that great against the Aerodactyl, just as an example? And don't all of those Pokemon, again, just as an example, not really switch into Raikou, just as a talking point? Not sure. I thought the start was fine, but I feel like it really lost direction towards the end. Now, granted, there's not a lot of Roar users for Volta. In fact, there might end up being no Roar users. Like, Raikou learns it, Charizard learns it, but I don't know how realistic it is that they're actually going to bring that. Roar Charizard, actually, as weird as it sounds, honestly, might be good in the matchup for Volta. Because if I'm Volta, I'm definitely bringing the Cloyster. I would never not bring it here. And I think the Charizard with Roar, I think the Zard forces a ton of switches in this matchup because it's so threatening against the meta, the Regice, the Heracross, the Steelix. And I think it will actually have a lot of opportunities to Roar here. And you probably need a Roar because I think the best bet for Celdanami is to make it sub-pass Vaporeon and try to pass a big sub to the Heracross or something to that effect and win that way. And I think that Volta probably wants some counterplay to that. So I think Roar Zard is actually a very real consideration for him. So Cell definitely has ways to win. And I think, like I said, they probably largely revolve around Vaporeon passing a sub and then just going to town with somebody, whether it's Meta or Heracross or Blaziken or whatever the case may be. But overall, I like both the team and the matchup better for Volta. I think that he could be just as or more aggressive than Celd can. I think his team has more variety and less redundancy. I think that the Cloyster was a huge pick against a team that is literally entirely grounded other than a Dodrio. And I mean, honestly, please bring Dodrio. I hope my opponent brings Dodrio. It blows. So Cloyster 100% makes the team. Everybody's grounded on the other side. And I think that Volta can match him blow for blow, aggro versus aggro. I think that his team is probably overall a little bit better. And like I said, less redundant, more cohesion. So I'm going to go with Volta in that matchup. So going back to my predictions, I've got TRowe winning, Blizz losing, and Volta winning for a 2-1 victory on the right-hand side by the orange team. Do you agree? Do you disagree? That's why we have a comment section. Please do let me know. And as always, if you've been enjoying these kind of videos and the tournament, please hit that like button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.